Most of us spend decades building an identity around what we do. And then life happens. The company downsizes, the diagnosis comes, and our dreams feel lost. And we're left in this terrifying space between who we were and who we'll become. My guest today, BJ Coleman, lived that exact moment when his NFL career ended, and he went from this life of precision and purpose to complete uncertainty. And listen, you don't need to understand football to understand what happens next, because this isn't really a sports story. It's a human story. And what he built from that breakdown, he translated into his first book called 𝘵𝗵𝗻𝘳, a playbook for navigating life's hardest transitions. I started our conversation by asking him about that space between identities, and his answer reveals why some people crumble when the world falls apart and others find a way to advance. Let's dive in. BJ, welcome to the show. Your book, 𝘵𝗵𝗻𝘳, is really about what happens when the identity you've built suddenly falls apart. And you lived that when your NFL career ended. I think that's the perfect place to start. What did it feel like in that moment when you were no longer the quarterback? What were the identities you were wrestling with?
Yeah, great question. First of all, thank you so much, Kim, for having me on the podcast and being willing to have the conversation around life's shifts and challenges. And the book is really a roadmap that I used and helped create for my transition, which, to your point, was coming from what I would consider a pretty high peak early in life, where I was able to live my dream of starting in Pee Wee football at 9 years old. Being coached by my father and being able to grow in a sport, a team sport that is so unique and valuable, full of lessons through the middle school years, into the high school years, and in beyond. Not facing setbacks, definitely having setbacks within the football realm, only to then have a coach tell me one day that the time of playing and being that quarterback had come to an end, and that's a big challenge. So it was a game that gave me so much, and to have that taken away in such a quick instance, so many of us have been through challenges like that. And when I was writing it, I felt that exact feeling this is not just my story. This is everybody's, experience in many ways, whether it be facing an identity challenge, whether that be facing loss, of a loved one or a family member, or just simply being told what you thought your life was once going to be. It's not going to be that anymore. And I remember that moment. I was sitting in Saskatchewan, Canada, when I was told, you're no longer going to be a member of the Saskatchewan Rough Riders, and best of luck to you. And oh, by the way, you better find your own way home out of this country and into another country. But at the time, you don't realize it is a business, and it's a really quick awakening of that. And that's no fault of the Saskatchewan Rough Rider organization. Let me make that very clear. It is a business, and you have to learn how to pivot in that moment and realize that there are skills that are very transferable, Kim, from the time when you were participating in the ultimate team sport to when now you are trying to make that transition into what I call the wild, and having to go from more of that we mindset to that me kind of mindset, where you're really having to look out for self. And that's a very difficult concept, Kim, when you built and spent most of your life in a very team type atmosphere where you're focused on, protecting the guy on your right and the one on your left, or the gal on your right or the gal on your left. And then you're now being told that's over. Good luck. And that's a big challenge. And that's exactly where this book meets you. It's meant for that fall from grace, and it meets you at the base of the backside of the mountain. So not up the climb. It's very difficult to listen at any point in that time, because you're so fixated and focused with the tunnel vision of being the best you can be in the moment. This book is post-peak, fall from grace. What do I do now, and how do I hit the next button? So that really is kind of the inspiration for the book, and was able to kind of bring that roadmap to life with the help of some extremely important partners, Forbes being the main one, and being able to put that into words on paper and get it out into the real world this past August.
It's really exciting. I found myself, obviously I didn't purposely dress to match the book cover today for everybody who's watching on YouTube, but I do have a ton of, dog-eared pages because I thought it's just incredibly relevant, especially given all the disruption that we are facing in our, US society right now, and our business climate is really challenging. And so I think the book and the timing couldn't have been more perfect. The structure of the book, just so as painting the picture for our listeners, is really built around these 8 pivot rules and corresponding exercises that I think are really accessible and really relevant today. Although we won't have time to focus on all of them, I do want to dive into a few that I think are just very kind of popped for me in particular, and especially with some of the work we do at Spark Effect. So the pivot rule number 2, you talk about do not be afraid of your iceberg. And I'm really curious, this feels very significant for so many who faced, job loss in this current climate and really are in this process of transition. So really talk a little bit more about how that rule kind of came for you and what people should be thinking about it from their iceberg perspective.
Yeah. And everybody kind of has seen the picture of the iceberg, right? Where just, about 5 or 10% of what you can see versus really everything else that's up underneath the water. And I can only speak, kind of to my experience, but I do believe it's very relevant for all that are in a pivot and that are going through a life's transition or a shift. We see oftentimes the end as a failure or something that's concluding. And when you're going through a pivot, it's really the invitation. It's really the door opening of something that you never could even have imagined. And that particular rule is very much predicated on you being able to open up and unlock this unbelievable potential and skill set that you may never have even explored or even thought of had you not gone through that life shift at the period of time in which you're going through it. And, for me, it's very easy, Kim, when you do get told you're no longer going to get to play the children's game anymore, or what you thought you were going to be, you're not going to be. It's very easy to start finger pointing, placing blame. That is where this came in for me is I've got to figure out how to hit the next button. What was I supposed to learn when I was in, the experience of college football, NFL football, the quarterback room? And how do I then transition those skill sets and synergies into what I'm doing next? Business, whether that's being, a part of another team, whether that's being the leader of a household, whether that's whatever it is. It's about really leaning into exploring and discovering, your own experiences and being able to get back up on that horse, as tough as that feels. But there's so much more to life beyond just that experience. It shaped you, and it's now giving you an opportunity to take that skill set, experience, and history into something else. Not necessarily what we all want, and it's not necessarily the easiest transition, but it gives you that opportunity to make that shift.
I think that's what you say it's just so critical. A lot of people that when they have that iceberg moment, it's coming at a time, especially right now, there's just, a heavier sense of layoffs happening for different various reasons. And I think one of the things, just to kind of transition this into this next one of the chapters you write about that I was really moved by and felt very relevant to the population that we work with when people are in an outplacement or career transition situation is where you really talk about grief and you talk about good grief. And this really resonated because of that. So many of these situations where layoffs are happening. Why did you feel it was so important to dedicate a chapter on that topic and the journey of your processing of your own grief in that way?
One of my favorite questions, Kim. So thank you for bringing that up, and kudos to you for feeling it. In one word, vulnerability. As a male, but it goes much beyond that in our biological makeup of humans, dealing with grief, shame, failure is so very difficult. And even probably more so now, Kim, than ever before because of social media, because of the platforms where everything's caught on camera now, and everybody wants to be perfect. I talk about in the book, I'm sure you've gotten to it, the Mayweather effect, where the undefeated record is so much highly sought after. And I will be very clear with you, in real life, it is not. It is the scars. It is the challenges that are truly the spoils, the trophies that help shape you into who you are, but also give you the knowledge and competency to be able to have the confidence to be able to do those things. Grief is something that when I was younger, wouldn't allow in or did not understand the processing of one's emotions or feelings, not because I didn't have great people or mentors around me. It was just not something that we really talked about much. In one way, it's a really healthy thing to be able to hit the next button and be numb. But in another way, when you don't work through and process, those different stages, it can absolutely lock up versus unlock some of your greatest talents. So the chapter itself, I felt extremely compelled to make sure that it stood alone. I had a lot of thought about joining it, maybe, and just making it a subcategory inside of another chapter. But after really looking at it, the space that I'm in, behavioral health, and understanding the vulnerability component, I really do believe that it is a very much standalone in and of itself. And what hopefully people will get from that is that it's okay to feel, and that it's okay to hurt, and that it's okay to ask for help, and that it's okay to not be perfect all the time, and that it's okay, and it's okay, and it's okay. And then we can keep inserting things after that. And what I've gotten is very much a response like yourself, where they said thank you, because especially when you're dealing with some of the peak performers, you don't want to let people in and let them know, that you're hurting. What it can do, though, is drive you, Kim, and it can help propel you once you unlock some of that vulnerability stage and work through those stages of grief. It sets you on a trajectory unlike any other when you come out the back end. But I will be very clear, that is a very strenuous and challenging process. It took me 7 years, Kim, to put the book together, and really start to think about what that's going to look like, and do I even want to write it, and is it even relevant? I'm glad I went with that chapter, and using the word positive good in front of it is inviting, right? It's letting folks know, hey, even I, myself, an NFL quarterback, can go through the same stages. It does not discriminate, Kim. We talk about that all the time in our behavioral health space. Addiction does not discriminate. Mental illness doesn't care how much money you have, who your parents are, what neighborhood you live in, how, it doesn't matter the things. Those are real challenges, and grief's no different. It doesn't matter if you're a future first ballot Hall of Famer or a practice squad, quarterback. When an end happens and a pivot is created, you still have some of the same feelings. Now, one might be doing it in a different, setting financially, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money you got, those feelings of loss and identity and change and shift are all still very much the same. And you can categorize those by where you're at through those stages of grief.
What I appreciate about you making that choice of it being its own chapter is we did a survey recently to help understand what are people feeling when they are impacted with job loss in particular. And what really stood out to us was that there is still a very large portion of individuals who feel a lot of shame when job loss happens, as even if it's happening as part of corporate downsizing. It has nothing to do with performance. It's just a business decision. And I think what I appreciated about reading that, and Trost, as you mentioned, vulnerability, also trying to help, what it's really about, your whole book, is really helping people to come to a place that they can see this as not something that is shameful, perhaps, that is more something that is just part of this world we are in as far as how these pivots emerge. And I appreciate you mentioning the pivot you made into behavioral health, because I think we should talk a little bit more about that work and what drew you to that, because I think that's a very unlikely place for many people to go that started in your background. So can you talk a little bit more about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of close the book on the point we just talked about grief and vulnerability, while I was concluding the book, I myself had another pivot. I was actually let go from a company that I was supporting and helping grow, not because of, to your point, outcomes or results, but anytime, and I learned this through athletics, that when you bring in a new coaching staff, they want to bring their assistants, and they want to be able to put their own operators in place, and there is no feelings, one way or the other towards the current status, but that too, Kim, was a challenge. Behavioral health. Yes, I tell folks all the time, and for many in our space, it chooses you. You don't choose it. I had the privilege of getting a phone call from a very important person in my career development, a gentleman by the name of Brent Turner, back in 2018. When football was done for me at the end of 16, I went to work for a bank on their insurance branch side. It's called BB&T Insurance Services, based in North Carolina. I was going to be harbored out of the Nashville office, and Nashville, as many folks know, is one of the healthcare capital of the world. And Brent, who happened to be a very high up executive at 𝘄𝗵𝗄𝘳 Healthcare at the time, kind of brought me in under his wing, not to the company, but just from a more mentor type of, how's the transition going from professional sports? What are you doing now? And kind of for 6 months, really kind of helped mentor me. And then finally, he kind of opened the door for me to make that transition and get back into the quarterback chair, as I like to call it, getting asked to come into a CEO and training program in the 𝘄𝗵𝗄𝘳 portfolio. And then the rest was history. I ended up doing several programs for 𝘄𝗵𝗄𝘳, and then making a transition to Summit Behavioral Health, and then a smaller company beyond Summit, where I was able to kind of follow Brent and learn what it looks like to lead outside of the athletic world. And it really kind of put me on a pretty neat trajectory in the space. And then I kind of got to be able to give back, because we see so many folks, Kim, in the athletic world, in the military setting, a lot of veterans who struggle, to make that transition. A lot of athletes, Kim, especially quarterbacks, stay within football, not just because of the monetary component, but because of the brotherhood and because of the comfortability and the lack of wanting to put ourselves in another arena that either might make us, look like we are lesser than, or make us, to be very frank, without the clapping and the people cheering, irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's a real topic, staying relevant, and you see it all the time, with the commercials from the folks who have retired, and you're going, why is he doing that Dunkin' Donuts commercial? You're like, what are you doing? It's because of the feelings and the thing we just talked about it not discriminating. You want to stay relevant. Like it's how do you
Right.
you don't want to fall out of favor and out of sight, out of mind type deal. And those are challenges. So I knew I wanted to try. I say it early in the book in first chapter is I did not want to come home, be the guy who got drafted to the NFL, and not because that the professions of insurance or being a coach or a money manager are bad, but just wanted to expand, my skill set and just see who was BJ Coleman, not to speak in third person, but this is what I
Yeah.
told myself, who am I outside of the game? Like,
Right.
can I even exist? Can I experience some of these challenges and struggles that the normal civilian go through? And can I come out successful? Can I come out a winner? And that's really where, the book was really based on is this is just like anybody else leaving the confines of their college or their mother and father's household for the first time at an early age. We are doing it just at a little bit later age. And what does that look like? So behavioral health was such an unbelievable experience for me to get out in the real world, still find that quarterback fix of running, large operations, all the while still being able to give back and provide a service to communities, and be able to grow teams and watch as they benefit from some of the skills that I was able to learn early on. We don't talk about this much, Kim, really in society, but it's about leadership, and what it takes to be a successful leader, which is
Mhm.
oftentimes a very unpopular and lonely
Yes.
place. And
Very much so.
right. And being a quarterback and being able to take something like that and put it in this space, which you just don't see a lot, has just been so unique and special for me. Not coming without any scrutiny or criticism, which I'm very used to being, in the limelight from a quarterback, perspective and having the articles and the critics, but being able to make that transition and overcoming some of those same critics and challenges. It's been really neat seeing the response of some of the higher performers in the space and seeing so many of them yearn for good leadership because it is challenging. It is not the first pick for nurses when they go to school to get into behavioral health. For high performing, peak performing folks to get into behavioral health or mental health, they obviously go different routes. So being in the space, seeing the gap that I've had the privilege of seeing, it's truly been an honor the last 7.5 years to serve.
Well, and it's an important space, and people who really find value in it, such as yourself, is really critical, right? So that the best types of institutions can be built to serve people that have such a deep need. So let me ask you about pivot rule number 6. That one also really stood out to me. You call it "help is not a 4-letter word." And I completely agree with this. One of the things that stood out so much is in the work that we do, we use an instrument called the Harrison assessment for team alignment work. And it's one of the really, it takes us into some really deep areas that allow for teams to figure out what are we doing and what under stress kind of really takes us into a different personality, if you will, but takes us into behaviors that don't serve us well. And so one of the US trends that I've noticed in organizations over recent years is really this tendency for people to be very high helpful in service to others, but very low assertive for their own selves and expressing what they need. And this imbalance causes a tremendous amount of issues for team alignment. So I really want to have you get to talk about that in the journey for yourself and in where you bring this forward in the book, because I think it's just incredibly important and one that I find really challenging for people to actually take action on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think fear is a good place for
Mhm.
us to start here. Society as a whole, Kim, what I have learned in my short 7 years being outside of the protective bubble of the athletic world, I think people have been taught and really adopted, and we got to go into this here because I don't want it to be something. I don't want it to be misconstrued. The fake it till you make it type of approach, although sometimes helpful, it's not when you're really trying to grow. You grow in an uncomfortable type of environment, and when you're comfortable, you can get very easily complacent. Help in so many, you know, forms of the word, people see as a negative, and that's just not true, Kim. It is
Right.
very much not true. And I tell my teams all the time, we have to create environments where disagreements are not risky.
Right. I love that.
And it is such a difficult thing to do, Kim. The higher you get on the pecking order, from CEO to division president to company COO and beyond, you are expected to have answers.
Mm-hmm.
You are expected. The best ones, the best operators, the best leaders, the best trailblazers that I have found. Yes, you want them to have a level of competency, to be smart, to understand, where they're going, for people to want to follow them, but they're not afraid to engage and create those forums where their professionals get to be the subject matter experts. And in a way, that is them asking for guidance and help, which has been the greatest thing I could have ever done, coming from a completely different world, Kim, athletics, to healthcare, where I could barely spell CEO. And now being able to engage with the professionals in the space who help guide me each and every day, who will tell you, that they are grateful for my leadership and guidance. Where I'm going, you guys are the experts. You're the ones who I'm leaning on. That is the version of help I'm referring to here. So I want to make sure folks understand it's not about not knowing anything and not having the ability to solve problems and not solution oriented. That's not what I'm saying. Is there are times in which you are to speak up versus not. So I don't want to. I want to make sure that we don't negate the fact that there are times where the fake it till you make it concept is relevant. But what I'm speaking to here in the book is raise your hand, ask the questions, fail, get up, fail faster. Asking for help is the single greatest thing that you can do in the right type of setting and forum. And it really changed my experience and helped me really come out in a winning strategy, because I wasn't too prideful, and I didn't allow myself to get in my own way. It allowed me to identify the people who could play, ask them for their guidance and help, and then it allowed me to sharpen my tools and my sword, so that I could be a better leader for them.
Nothing is linear in how we go through the process, and we think about sometimes asking for help is so much tied to, have we really gone through the grief process? Have we processed, past the sense of shame, if that's one of those emotions, and so that we are ready to ask for help? And part of what I think is interesting, and you have a great exercise in the book for this, is moving you into that place of asking for help sooner than later helps you really get into that place of movement and into a place of more positive support and feelings and things. And I think it's just a huge opportunity, for at least our U.S. culture to get more into the seeing that this is it's a healthy place. It's not a place that should be considered, a negative. And I think it's a big opportunity for us all.
Well, and you mentioned the key element to the word help, right? Movement.
Yes.
Oh, and I hope that is what you take away from the book. There's a reason that the title of the book oozes movement and momentum, right? I want folks to realize you're only going to accomplish your greatness, your purpose, when you move. It's got to be about movement. Don't find yourself in complacency or in a very stagnant position. We all find ourselves there,
Mhm.
I should say, but it's about being willing to put
Yes.
that one foot in front of the other. It does not have to be large movement, but you got to keep moving. You said it so beautifully, Kim. It's about movement. And that is what help really is you positioning yourself in a position so that you can intersect with those
Mhm.
people that you need to collide with so that you can continue to grow and learn. That is help. That is putting yourself in a
Yes.
position to help yourself. And that is going to allow you to kind of control some of your own destiny and trajectory. You can't control the outcome. It's about the process. And the process
Absolutely.
oozes movement. So thank you for reiterating that. I'm so glad to hear that you pulled that too. Because every time, I discuss the book, I wait to see if people feel the move. If you don't, then I've failed you. Because it's got to be about you taking ownership of where you're at. That fall from grace is real, but you got to own that. You earned that expectation. You earned that pain, that grief, because you climbed to those levels. And I'm not talking about you have to be an NFL quarterback or a Special Forces Navy SEAL or the successful house mom who's running your
Yeah.
household. It doesn't matter where this book is coming into your life, but there's a reason you picked it up, and understand it took movement for you to do that. And I don't want people to
Absolutely.
lose sight of that.
Well, and as I've said before, I think how you designed it so beautifully is that there's movement throughout each chapter in the fact that you bring those exercises through that allow people to jump in and take it a step at a time in a way that can feel like we have agency and control, right? Especially when things feel so out of control in certain situations. So I think that was really, really amazing. You talk about in one of the chapters, and you've alluded to it a bit. I think I just like to spend a moment on it, embracing the hard. And I love the quote from your book that you say, setbacks aren't failures, they're feedback. So, what do you say to someone listening who feels like they've experienced a lot of hard lately? And some of it may be, like we said, maybe it is because of a job loss, of a corporate decision and not a performance decision. So, what do you have to offer for those people?
I'm a big fail, get up, fail faster type of person. And when something doesn't work out in the way in which you expected it to work out, it might be because down the road you will be able to look back to your point. Success is not linear. Success can be very much a knockdown, go backwards, two steps forward, one step. It's very much something that you could go back later, reflect on it, and realize that's why that pain or that struggle or that quote unquote failure happened. We get to choose our hard, Kim. Whether
Mhm.
we want to accept that reality or not, we get to choose that hard. Whether that be something as personal and sensitive, and I can speak to this because I've been through it. Whether that be to stay in, a toxic relationship or not. That's a hard you choose. Do I choose the hard staying in it, or I choose the hard
Mhm.
I'm going to choose to exit, but now I got to start over. That's a hard that you have to choose. You have to choose your hard. Do I want to stay with the current employer, or do I risk going out and facing new challenges that maybe put me in an uncomfortable state, which is growth? Do I choose that hard? So, people, I would say that those who have continuously felt like they've been knocked down at every point. That just means that you haven't found necessarily that final landing spot, and to keep moving. You have to stay moving. Here's what we do know: when you stop, it's over. Like when you
Yeah,
stop, you won't get
completely
there.
agree.
So it really
Yeah.
kind of makes the decision really easy. You got to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And that's the greatest advice and feedback, Kim, that I have gotten, is that there are people that have called me and said, BJ, I did it. I understand it now. There were moments, Kim, when I was off in the field, transitioning hospitals early on in that 7 year span, where I would wake up going, I just got to put one foot in front of the other today. This feels like Groundhog's Day. I feel like I am literally, to use a football reference, it is third and long, and I am praying for a pass interference or something. There is no good play to call today. I have nothing for it today, but all I got to do is show up. That is my growth moment today, is one foot in front of the other. So hard is real. Hard is probably more so than the easy or what you would consider a successful experience. But it's those beauty. It's that beauty that when you do come out the other side, you have something that can't be taken from you and is so franchisable. Kim, you'll hear me talk about that a lot to my team. Is value versus success. There's a whole chapter and experience on that. Oh my gosh, if there's one passionate golden thread and throughout that whole thing, it's the failures, it's the challenges, it's the pain, it's the hard that creates and helps you harden and become very, very jaded in a way that helps you improve your value, which is ultimately franchisable, versus success, which is very fleeting. It can be a one and done. Value allows you to be able to go into multiple situations, different settings, different experiences, and still bring something to the table, versus the one-time Hail Mary that you threw up, you got it caught, everybody remembers it, but you can't replicate it. And there is no real value in that. So I hope that helps kind of with the idea of those that are going through their hard and choosing their hard. You're not going to be able to avoid that. Life is a series of challenges and getting knocked down. And that's the pivot. The pivot should even, in many ways, be a plural form. We go through multiple pivots in our life. But even in our daily experience, we're pivoting. We thought we had a meeting at 9. There was a technical difficulty. I have to rearrange. It's all about how you approach it with your attitude and your mental state, which I think is so fitting for the behavioral health component and for the grief, chapter. It's all about putting yourself in the right mindset to being able to hit that next button.
So you teed up just a perfect final question. So what is your next pivot?
Oh, great question. So currently I am coming up in 6 days now. I will be an official 1-year anniversary of my first real business, which is Pivotal Health Partners. We specialize in being able to go into low performing assets in the healthcare space and helping them stand up in one of 3 ways: financially, clinically, or operationally. So we're coming up on a 1-year anniversary of that. And I'm currently in a position, hopefully, to be able to position the company into acquiring its first asset, and hopefully 2026, so that we can continue to provide services and really roll out our playbook for what we feel like is the right way to do what we do, and hopefully expand and grow that. I have got such a passion for folks that are peak performers, that are transitioning from what they thought they were going to be doing to now what. I'm looking at moving into kind of the speaking circuit and being able to kind of support that way, as well as young males and where they're at in terms of an education, and focusing on some of the gaps that I'm seeing across the private sector, which I think are going to be more and more apparent, Kim, to be quite frank. Some of those being in the trades. How can I support those looking to make those transitions, not knowing where they're wanting to start? And hopefully I can be kind of a support system, both through my time and mentorship, as well as hopefully financially being able to support some of these folks as they look to making their pivot.
It's exciting to hear what you've got on the horizon. And I know, our listeners will be wanting to learn more and check out. So I'm going to encourage everybody to buy your book. We'll have the link in the show notes. And BJ, I just want to thank you so much for the conversation. I've found it to be really energizing and just fulfilling in my soul. And so thank you very much for making the time to join us today.
You bet. Thank you, Kim. Appreciate you very much.
And for listeners, we have resources and links to today's conversation that you can find in the show notes and by visiting 𝘂𝑊𝑟𝑒_podcast.com. Remember to like and follow our podcast on your favorite platform so more leaders can benefit from these conversations. And thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Courage to Advance, where transformative leadership isn't about having all the answers, it's about having the courage to find them.